Hello.
Chris. What's
What's
going
happening?
on?
Another
Yep,
day.
another day.
Yeah, but
Another day,
what?
another group of people doing shitty things to people.
That's exactly right. And another day of a notorious gang or group, whatever you want to call them, doing shitty things to people,
Yeah,
and a lot of people in this particular case.
yeah. Man, you ain't kidding about that. We'll talk about those numbers. But so this has to do with the one of the bigger stories in this week, in that it's the Canvas. It's Instruct. I think their name is Instructure, and they
Yeah,
have a software program called Canvas that actually works with universities and schools, and is a learning management system, an LMS system. But it's more than an LMS because it keeps up with grades and assignments and all of that stuff. So it's
yeah,
used as
it's used to communicate and
right,
yeah. I mean, I don't know if necessarily I'd call it an ERP, but it has a lot of it's a core system
right.
for education, and we're talking about all levels of education.
That's correct. Yeah. Well, I teach a college class, and we don't use this particular system. We use one that's exactly like it, though.
Yeah.
And yeah, that's what you do. You communicate two-way with students. You give them assignments. Your syllabus is in there. They indicate when they upload their assignments to be looked at and graded, and so it's a two-way communication. And they also keep up with their grades. You put grades in through this, and you do all, and you report all of that stuff to the administration when it's time, like in finals, which that's one of the reasons we're talking about this now. Why are we talking about it right now? Well, it's because most universities in the US that are on the quarter system anyway are right in the middle of finals and or final grades and graduations and getting all that stuff squared away. So this is really kind of a pivotal time, which tells you why these assholes picked this particular moment to do what they did.
Yeah, exactly right. No, that's exactly right. Yeah, that wasn't by accident for sure.
Nah. No, I mean they got to the point. So I mean, you can imagine logging into that system as a student or whatever, and then when you do, instead of Canvas popping up and you seeing your stuff, you see a ransom note. It literally they were able to, and we'll talk about that, the sequence of events, but they actually got into the system and modified the site, and so people were actually seeing direct evidence of what was going on, and this was from the students on up. So it was a very big deal. And you know
Eh,
these guys, right? I mean, you know about this bunch that
Yeah,
we've
yeah, this
described.
much. Yeah, yeah, ShinyHunters. Yeah, I mean, they've been making even more news lately. I mean, and the thing about this is not our first educational platform we've seen this
Mm-mm.
happen. I mean, we saw last year, or 2024, at the end of 2024, we saw Power School, and even before that was Blackbaud.
Mm.
And the thing is all of these systems have something in common. Millions use it.
Yep.
And I think in this particular case, if some information serves me right, from a colleague of mine, he's seeing this as probably four times the size from an impact perspective of individuals as the Power School one was, and that was a ton. So, and again, and also not to mention this is global. So
That's correct.
these are global platforms, right?
That's correct.
So,
Yeah,
so yeah, that's not just constrained here to the United States of America.
no, and I mean, like Chris was saying, this is K through 12, colleges, universities, the whole nine
That's
yards
right.
that are a part
No,
of this. Now, the number that is claimed by the Shiny Hunters guys is at 275 million records that they got a hold of. Now, that again, claimed by them, not verified yet by any other sources, but claimed by them to have 275 million.
and it'll
I
probably take some time for that to be
Yeah,
verified, or at least publicly verified. It might
right.
be internally verified, but I mean, and what I've heard is it's mainly names, addresses, maybe emails. I'm not for sure, but and I know internal comms, so this
Yeah,
communication stuff. So that's to the extent that information was accessed. Nothing more than that, as far as
yep,
what I've been told so far.
yep. And well, I mean, the thing that's interesting, because this is a university, right?
Yeah,
There are regulatory requirements related to,
there are.
yeah.
Yeah,
And
and I think
so,
that's the thing here, though. So this one, we'll get into the details of the technical side, but what I wanted to first kind of focus on is like, hey, this is a little bit different of a situation.
Yep.
You have a single platform, and this single platform does have the capability, and a lot of institutions use this capability to integrate with other parts of the educational business. So
Hmm.
they have APIs, they do everything like that. It's a very, very powerful platform. So you have that side of things, but you have an issue here where you have student information that's been compromised. And there's really like no like it's like no secret about that. That's not like somebody has an attack and they're kind of verify it and you go through all the
Right.
steps. I mean, Shiny Hunters already did that for them. So what does that mean? That means really from an exercise perspective, this is a regulatory one. And
Yes.
so, I was trading messages earlier today about this, and there are some there are and it's just not one clear regulation. It depends on I know that, for example, Colorado and the state of Washington, they have more. I don't know if you want to call it aggressive disclosure requirements
Right.
when it comes to students. So if you're in that state, that's an easy thing to figure out. If you are at a university, but your student is a resident of Colorado or Washington, that may or may not apply to you. And then obviously international students is like is a big deal as well.
Yeah.
And then FERPA,
Right.
is that's there's some qualifications on where that comes into play. So, but really that for that first thing I mentioned was the Colorado Washington international students. There's some immediate probably requirements to do notification much sooner than you would in typical in these situations.
Right.
So like this is really more of like, look, you could take some technical steps because this situation occurred if you're higher ed. But really, at this point, there's nothing like it's kind of a known factor of how far these shiny hunters got.
Yeah.
So there's really you don't need to like freak out, start shutting all sorts of crazy stuff down. But from a legal perspective, you need to be Johnny on the spot there and be on top of that because there's going to
Yep.
be you need to be in front of that. And I know with a lot of school districts, schools, they have like their chain of command is differently. It's not this they have like an executive team that makes these decisions. Sometimes they have a board or whatever the heck they have, skill
County
board,
school
whatever.
board. Right. Yeah.
Yeah, and they all have different requirements on how this needs to be done, approved, and then if they have to have an emergency session, and then they have to provide if you're public, you got to provide notification. I mean, there's all sorts of crazy business when it comes to compromises of schools, and especially if you're public in any kind of way. So
Yep.
yeah, I mean, we can say this is a great exercise with IR because
Mm.
again, there's some technical stuff, but really there's not a lot IT has to do in this case. This is almost everybody except for IT needs to be involved in an
Yeah.
incident like this.
Yeah. 100%. We ran an IR game today, and it had a lot of. It just so happened to have a lot of um, compliance related things in it, like ITAR and
Oh yeah.
these more sophisticated ones that the defense directorate now applies for. This. I mean, honestly, because that's a federal. Those are federal, right? And
Yeah.
this is FERPA is a federal, is an actual federal mandate. So yeah, I mean, when you get into these, that you're going to have, like Chris is talking about, you're going to have multiple timers running for each one of those reporting requirements that you have,
Yeah.
and they could all be running simultaneously and have different durations and all of that. So as part of an incident response plan that Instruct should have, is like, okay, tracking those compliance requirements and then making sure that you got a clock running on all of them so that you know that you're actually going to file a response in time. Because if you don't, the penalties are not pleasant by any stretch. So
Yeah, and they're not going to say, "Oh, well, this happened to so many schools. We'll give you a pass," or,
the hell
well,
no.
yeah, no, they're not going to do that. The other thing about it is, the bad news is, there's thousands upon thousands of institutions having to address this thing pretty quickly,
Hmm.
and again, global. And but the good news is, it's all the same thing.
Yeah.
So, like I know, coming from the insurance business, when we would have situations where a big 0 day or something where there was every call we got was the exact same thing. Yeah, we got absolutely hammered with calls and hammered with work, but it's all the same work.
Yeah.
And that's going to be kind of the same here. The same thing here is, all right, who's your students? Where do they live? Here's what we're going to do.
It can be a
And
process, a consistent process. That's
yeah, and
the
then, yeah, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say the thing that really stuck out to me on this deal was how fast this kind of all went down. Right, it happened between the April 29th and May 8th, so
Yeah,
it
yeah.
wasn't like there was like a whole bunch of time, between the time they really started being active. Right.
Yeah, and if you think about this too, I mean, the demographics that saw this are the people out there that spread the word the quickest, right? So
Hmm.
you're talking about you're talking about students,
Right.
especially college students and high school students. This stuff popped up on their screen or whatever, and man, there's no secret. I mean, I'm sure this thing spread through wildfire faster than anything.
Yeah,
And
went to their parents, and then their parents
oh
lit up
yeah,
like a Christmas tree. Right. So yeah.
yeah, exactly. So the other thing I was going to mention on this from an insurance perspective is yeah, I mean the carriers they usually they'll put together a plan and they'll just be receiving these calls and then basically stacking you up and assigning you wherever it goes. I mean, it's again, it this as big as this effort is, the steps involved are going to be fairly consistent. It's just you have to go through those steps and make sure you document things. Now, if you don't have insurance, you still need to reach out to breach counsel. You need to find an attorney who knows what they're talking about with regards to this stuff,
Right.
privacy counsel, breach counsel, because yeah, you don't want to be the one that didn't follow the rules.
Oh, there's 9,000 institutions involved in this, right? So they're gonna have to get in line. You know what I mean? That's a lot of people to work. That's a lot of institutions to work through. I don't know.
Yeah, and the other
I don't know
thing,
how
yeah,
long that's going to take.
yeah, and the other thing is I haven't talked to anybody about like how this is going to work from a contractual perspective because this is going to come back to this, and this is where maybe at some point I'm sure we'll find a breach attorney that'll talk about this a little bit more publicly. But this kind of comes around somewhat similar to a move it deal where hey, look,
Hmm.
this all this data is in this platform. It's obvious this platform was compromised. They're technically responsible for dealing with this situation, but can they deal with it as quickly as they need to be? But are they a data maintainer and
Yeah.
you're the data owner? So the school, you're the data owner. So ultimately, I'm not an attorney, but this is how I'm seeing it just through
That's actually a good
experience.
point, though.
Is to say, look, it's still going to fall on you, right? So ultimately, the contract might say Canvas is going to take care of it,
Yep.
but or not in, whatever their name is
Instruct.
in structure, yeah,
Yeah,
and
instructor.
structure is going to take care of it versus Canvas, but I mean, yeah, they're going to take care of it, but what does that mean? How quickly that's going to move and how is that going to be handled? From an
Hmm.
insurance perspective, they're going to have a policy. If you have an insurance policy, it's going to be a process called subrogation where they're going to go, those carriers behind the scenes will work together and try to figure that mess out. And believe me, all these insurance carriers want to do this in the most efficient way
Yep.
because something like this at this scale with this impact financially I can do ripple effects from a cyber policy going forward, right? You could see
Cost.
rates
Yeah.
go up
Right.
and all sorts of stuff, right?
Absolutely.
So the idea would make this cost go down. But I do think that in the end, it's going to be a lot of stress and a lot of work, but it's the same work. And people are
Yeah.
going to get a bunch of letters and that's it. See you
Yeah.
later.
Yeah. Chris, we talk about this all the time. How you respond to an incident, initially is, and a lot of times makes or breaks you, right?
Yeah.
And one of the features of this particular incident was that, from the time the first incursion was detected, it got detected. But the instructor basically says, "Oh, well, we saw that, we plugged that hole, and no worries, it's all taken care of. You
Yeah.
don't have to worry about it now. We got that all finished, right?" And then a few days later, they found out they hadn't actually shut the door on it. So now you've got, as an institution, now they've proclaimed, we had an incident, we saw it, we put a plug in it, we're all done, no worries. And then just a few days later, they get their ass handed to them in a big fashion, right?
Yeah, and this is the time to speculate on that. So this kind of reminds me back in the Blackbaud situation. They came out and said, "Hey, we got this stack. All your data is stored encrypted, so you don't have anything to
Mm-hmm.
worry about." And then they actually sent out letters, if I recall correctly. And then they had to send out another set of letters later because yes, the data was encrypted in production, but not on the backups. And the backups were also compromised. So then they had to say, well, our bad, the data was compromised. So this is just people not learning from other people's lessons. I mean, and
Yeah.
there's a lot of things here. So we can kind of peel it apart. Number one, however this compromise happened, was this something that should have been? I doubt this was a 0 day. My bet is somewhere, somehow this was a known issue. Maybe they thought the risk was low that somebody would find it or do whatever, exploit it or whatever, and that. So now you got to question why was that delayed? And then the second piece is this. All right, you guys plugged a hole. Like it didn't work. So like who was the person that certified the hole being plugged?
Yeah, somebody has to attest that they plugged the hole.
Yeah,
That's good. That music's going to stop, and somebody's going to be stuck without a chair on that one, right? Because it's like, okay, wait a minute, because that's what's going to come back and haunt you. It would have been different if they said, hey, you know what, we've got an incident, we're investigating, we don't know the full extent, we're taking measures. That's one thing, but to say no, we fixed it, that's a whole nother thing, right? When it comes back around, because you and I both know, Chris, that these things when they go to litigation, it's if you have handled it correctly and documented the fact that you were making best effort to protect your organ, protect the people who were using the product, and you use best practices after it was determined that you did it, which means you're making a best effort, then yeah, you're still liable, but the limitations, there are going to be limitations about how much it's actually going to cost you. If on the other hand you have an incident, you say, hey, we saw it, we fixed it, no worries, it's not a problem anymore, and then days later you're literally struck and everybody in the universe sees that you hadn't
yeah,
actually got it fixed. That opens you up to terms that are called, that are used like negligence and or culpability and all these other terms that all of a sudden take this from a manageable, not a good, not good, it's going to cost you money, but from something survivable to the potential of it being not survivable, because insurance companies are not necessarily going to pay claims on something when you were standing in front of everybody saying you fixed it and then it turns out you actually haven't done it. There's going to be a lot of argument on that underwriting part, right?
well, and I think on the litigation part that you mentioned too. I mean, look, I mean, class action.
Yeah.
You
Yeah,
know, it
that's the
used to
problem with
be,
this one.
yeah, it's probably this one, and there's so many. I mean, and there's other things that can happen internationally too. So the U.S. is going to be the worst because it's the most litigious
Yeah.
by far. But you got to be thinking about, yeah. I mean, hey, look, if you if you never, didn't come out and say, hey, we plugged the hole, and now you have to kind of eat crow a few days later, that's not a good thing, and that's got to be a plaintiff's attorney's dream.
Yeah, of course. It's a
Uh,
class action suit ready to rumble, right? I mean,
yeah,
that's
as Red
exactly what
Rebel
it is.
now, and it used to be again not an attorney, but it used to be you had to like prove damages and all that kind of stuff. But in today's world, you don't. And so what is going to come out of this again? It's name. I did mention earlier name, student ID, email, and some internal comms. I mean, so what is a court? What's the court going to award here? Was there any damage really done? My opinion, it's kind of to be determined. But the unfortunate side is, juries will see this differently. So it'll be interesting to see how this thing shakes out.
Yep. So
Yep.
we can get into, if we want to, we can start getting into what actually the attack vector, right? And this one was pretty simple. They have this thing called a free for teachers accounts,
Yep.
and this is something they're actually known for. But you can basically get a free account as an educator, and it doesn't require you to do any real serious validation as to who you are or anything, right? So it's a
Yeah.
convenience account to get people on board, to kind of get them, how we call it, a freemium model, right? Where you can get on board and it's basically free, but then as you get in there, use it, then you start wanting more features and that kind of deal. But that's kind of that's what this was a free for teachers kind of a, kind of an account that they basically figured out a flaw in. Now that hasn't been disclosed, by the way. The flaw that allowed people to actually use those free for teacher accounts, it hadn't been disclosed. There's some speculation in some of the research that came back from our army of LLMs as they were
That's
rooting
right.
around the internet. They found a few things that were interesting that seems to make sense to me, but not a lot of it was is corroborated. So we're going to be there's a little bit of speculation. So that's not nailed down.
But what would you say on a scale of one being easy, five being hard? If you had to guess, how easy was this for shiny hunters to actually exploit,
I
pull
bet
off?
this was a two. I bet
Yeah.
this was so easy because I mean, I already feel pretty certain about some of the information that came back about it, abuse of an API, API in the process and that kind of. I
Yeah.
know because that's really why I say that because that's what's been going on lately. We've reported on this, right? People are using more automation, and those automations work better when they're using things like APIs to actually interface with systems because they can just run so many trials on it, and then once they actually do get in, then the automation really it starts taking they can take advantage of it. So I'm almost certain that they were exploiting an API flaw that's involved in this. I can't imagine anything that would allow them to get in there and exfiltrate that much data and it not be on the level of something like an API,
Yeah.
interface with them. I just can't imagine. I try to think like, how could you really do this? Because you're getting in there and then trying to stage data and then offload that data. That's not an easy task, especially when, when you got 275 million records. Yeah, granted, that's not terabytes or anything, but you still got to marshal it all, and you got to get it in one place where you can start hauling it out of there, and that's
And you
just
got to
it's
use it, right?
yeah, right,
years ago we saw this in the ransomware world where some of these groups would get a hold, especially if they'd hit an MSP or like the
right,
Kaseya VSA attacks where it was just a huge volume.
yeah,
And that, I mean, those guys, they have to manage that because here, this group is trying to extort.
yeah,
And they can't just have a big pile of data and saying, we got, no, it's got to be organized. And they got to be able to, be able to say, okay, yeah, this is data that's going to be worth this much money. It's going to be worth this much money. I
right,
mean, there's a process to this. I do think they bit off more than they can chew.
yeah,
And usually that gets law enforcement a lot more motivated to take you down. So we'll see how that goes. But yeah, I mean, and they're trying to extort. In my opinion, dealing with these things, the data these guys got, yeah, it's kids' data, but it's not photos, it's not this other stuff. I mean, that information could change, but I don't really see any reason to be paying these guys at all.
no,
I
no matter
I hope
what
no
it
one pays these guys a dime.
yeah. Well, I will because it's not like a traditional ransomware. This is a data extortion thing, so this is not
Yeah,
the same as
it's
they
pure
didn't
data
they
extortion.
didn't encrypt all these people's
Mm.
systems. They just got the data and are saying, look, if you don't pay us, we're going to turn it loose. That's what they're saying. So yeah,
Yeah,
you're
and I
right.
just think there's stuff there.
Yeah, I'm with
Yeah,
you on that, man. Why would you bother when you
yeah, yeah,
know, even if they tell you they're not going to release it, that they're just going to they're going to bank that data and 5 years from now,
yeah. Who
it's going to
knows?
tether
They'll
its way
provide
back out on the
somebody
dark web.
some way. Yeah, it's not.
Right.
Yeah, but I guess we'll take a little bit of break here, Bob, and kind of
Yeah,
make an
yeah, yeah.
announcement about
That's right.
the future of our program here.
Right. Yeah, yeah. I think Chris said it at more than one points over the last, I don't know, 6 months that we've been doing this now. It's over 6 months, 7 or 8 months. But yeah, he said, look, we're not geniuses about things like marketing and
That's
or
right.
anything to make us look popular. Obviously, we're not
Yeah,
we're not any good at making ourselves look
yeah. We don't even.
be
Yeah,
popular.
we don't even have makeup artists helping us out, and nor do we use AI filters.
No, no. So what you see is what you get, right? But we have actually settled on a name for for what it is that we're doing now. So this is going to going forward. This is going to be the Signal to Noise podcast. So
That's right.
pretty excited about actually having a legitimate podcast instead of us doing this and just dropping stuff out on YouTube. We're actually going to route this through a real podcast platform and get that all set up over the next few weeks. And it's going to be, we love the name because it really does kind of talk about what we like to do, which is to take all the bullshit out there and reduce it down to what the meaningful signal that you should be getting out of these
Yeah,
things. And it
and this a
seems to
little
be
bit.
our trademark at this point.
You're exactly right. And this is kind of the other one, that our past episodes have been, hey, no one's making a deal out of this and they should be
Yeah.
making a big deal out of
Yeah.
this. This one, hey, this is a big deal. It's hitting national news, international news. Like
Right.
it's at the top. We're trying to boil it down into what it really is. I mean,
Yeah.
it's bad, but like it's interesting. You could say, hey, they didn't encrypt data. I mean, you think about it, if they had the ability to go in there and modify stuff or encrypt stuff
They
or
could have.
yeah, they could have. I mean, change a bunch of grades. Everybody in the world gets straight A's, or or they all get a 1 point, whatever. I mean,
Yeah.
it could have happened probably. I mean, I don't
Yeah.
know what to the extent of the access that these guys had and the ability they had, but it could have been a lot worse.
Yeah.
But that's kind of the idea, even behind this one, is to take a very big story and kind of try to decompose it down and explain it in layman's terms as much as we can.
Yeah, well, I mean, get to the points that matter. You know what I mean? Because in this case, again, there's no IOCs associated with this, right? This is not one of those things. They found a flaw and they exploited it, and it just put them in a position to really do a lot of damage. And so
Yeah,
that's really what this is about. This one's, all the other ones that we've had. I mean, it seems like recently, every time we turn around, we're talking about those damn NPM module,
that's right.
NPM modules being, co-opted by bad people like Team PCP and the others. And that's been going on. We just had an episode. Well, you'll see them coming out. One on SAP, and then Cisco
Yeah,
got it. So we've seen lots of those. And the thing that was common about those is the attack primitive was not being managed. Nobody, even back when we started talking about it, was saying anything about the root cause and the attack primitive that was making that all possible. And almost, I swear, even to this day, I don't feel like it's got near the visibility or understanding by people. This one's different. This one is just huge, and it needed to be highlighted because this affects a lot of people. There's a lot of compliance issues related to it, and like Chris said, we just want to boil off a lot of the noise and kind of get down to what the core, what the core elements of this. What should we learn from this? You know what I mean? And some of the key things we should learn. This is again one of those we've had to report on these for weeks now. There's no IOCs. It's a living off the land sort of an attack, right? Where they found a flaw and they exploited it. How the system already works. It was something the way the system already worked, and they exploited it and got where they shouldn't have gotten, based on whatever that flaw was, which hasn't been disclosed yet. But that's happened. I mean, that's happened more recently than the other way, where there was a vulnerability that wasn't patched or anything like that. Those aren't the problem anymore. There's enough problems with the way stuff works and people taking advantage of it. So that's
well, yeah, I think too is I mean, this is different, but this again is not like an infrastructure issue.
right.
This doesn't appear to be like a firewall vulnerability, or it doesn't appear to be like,
Yeah.
hey, somebody got through, through a VPN or anything of this nature.
Right.
Again, this is more at the application, the development, and again, we keep talking about this, but this is
Yes.
yet another attack on developers. I
Yeah.
mean, or whatever, and so.
Mm,
Yeah,
I agree.
and and AI is enabling the living crap, and people are now figuring out, hey, I can integrate the living crap out of things. And here's a good situation where you go, I got this thing integrated. Holy crap, this happened. Is any
Right.
of the stuff that it's touching also going to have an issue?
Yeah.
So
100%.
yeah, it should generate a lot of discussion, and probably some more startups will be funded as a result of this attack.
Yeah. Yeah, so we're pretty excited about signal to noise, and we hope you guys stick around and actually watch how this goes. But this is episode 19 for us, so
Yeah,
we've been at it a while, and got more to talk about. I don't think we're ever going to run out of shit to talk about, that's for sure.
no,
So
nope,
stick around for that. So do we want to? We can talk about the model comparison. So for those of
yeah,
you, if you just happen to be tuning in for the first time, we use LLMs to do a lot of analysis work because that's what they're good at, right? So, we built some pretty special prompting and everything to make sure that we're getting non-hallucinogenic immaterial, and we use the LLMs to synthesize an executive review. By the way, if you haven't seen this before, we're going to put all that out. It'll all be available so that you can download all those analysis reports yourself and root in through it all you want to. There'll be a LinkedIn article that ties to to this podcast video as well as the documents. So you'll be able to pick all that up off of LinkedIn when we post that here shortly. So model comparison. So that's one of the things that we do. That actually, it was Chris's idea that we should really tell them what these models are saying and not saying together. You know what I mean?
yeah,
Because I think it's interesting always to do. So I'll do what they agreed on, and then Chris can talk about where they diverged.
yeah.
But
Bob always
basic.
likes to be the positive guy, so that's fun.
Well, yeah, sometimes.
Yeah.
So the where they all agreed. So they all agreed on the free for teachers account being the vector. That was unanimous. It was a two-phase intrusion. They got in, proved their point that they could get in. This was the problem, though. Instructure kind of basically said, "Oh, we shut them out," and actually closed the event on their webpage. And then that was April 29th, and on the May 7th, they were in there. They defaced the actual website, so they were in there far enough that they could edit the website. And everybody agreed on that. They confirmed the data types were the names, emails, student IDs, and all of the messages that went between two-way communications. And then containment steps, the FFT was shut down. They did revoke the tokens, and they started doing things like rotating the keys, and monitoring. So they all of the LLMs agreed that that was that was some of the remediation steps that were taken. There were no passwords or government IDs or financial data were confirmed stolen in this. It was really more all student and student communication related. But again, there's regulations about it. By the way, GDRP is not kind to this kind of a data leak, right? So European
Yeah.
standards are a lot tighter when it comes to
Yeah. They,
students and
some
underage people.
something like this. Yeah, there could be some pretty massive fines from that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
especially in Europe. Yes, so I agree.
Yeah. Where the divergence happened. Um, the 275 million, 9,000 students, 9,000 schools. ChatGPT and Perplexity treated this as unverified. Grok noted it as claims, which cited university advisories to kind of, give some credibility to that number. And Gemini treated it as near confirmed.
Yeah.
So that's interesting. Yeah. Gemini added a May 12th ransom deadline, talks protocol use, and of the .onion negotiation channel. So for those of you who don't know, that's typical negotiation modalities that these threat actors like to use for negotiations purposes.
Hmm.
Some groups out there will do it via email, but in this case, at this scale and whatever they're talking about, yeah. So what are those? It's a .onion's a dark web. It's just an address for a dark website that you have to go through with a special Tor browser to get to it. If you have no idea what I'm talking about, keep it that way. There's no use. That's not something you want to play around in. And then Talks it's basically chat using Tor as well. So think about Tor as a massive network of devices. So if I'm connecting to Bob, instead of just being this nice little point-to-point connection or a few points in between, it's just scattered all over the universe, and it is impossible. I would say it's totally impossible, but it's nearly impossible to find out who's communicating with whom and where you're at. And that's the whole idea of that. So that's what they used to do that. And Gemini was one that added that deadline. Must have come from somewhere.
Yeah, it's out there somewhere.
Yeah. And it's possible that someone already had reached out and, start communicating with these guys to see what it was all about. That's coming as well. Whether that was an instant response for them doing it intentionally or somebody just getting a wild hair and doing it themselves and being retarded, to use the R word. Gemini's timeline used 2024 throughout instead of 2026. I guess that LM was living in the past. I don't know.
Yep.
No.
It does make that mistake sometimes, date wise.
It is. It was, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I saw something about one of them was just somebody got LM just be aware that there was even a clock existed.
Yeah.
And then once it learned of that, it kind of changed its perception of things, which is kind of crazy. And then Perplexity sourced almost exclusively from Instructure's own pages. So Instructure's own pages have been publicly accessible. You can just go there and see what the stats of things are.
Right.
Missing AP, Krebs on security, and the TechCrunch coverage around this. So they were laser focused just on that. They didn't take any other of these sources, which usually, like Krebs on security, is a very good source. Brian does not. He does not put stuff on there that is not right. Let's put it that way.
Yeah, so that's kind of where they diverge for sure. So
yeah, so yep, that's pretty much it.
I think that's it. Yeah. So be sure and take a look at the data, the analysis work. It'll be out there. Again, just really affects students and faculty and staff, and the IT admins in those institutions, because they got to deal with the API keys and other things that need to get rotated. If that, again, there's speculation, but I think it's reasonable to assume that APIs were involved in this, given the speed and the volume of data that was transmitted. I don't see how you could go any other way. I can't think of another way to do that, to be honest.
Yeah, no. Yeah, I agree. Also, here's the thing about this story too, is the impact, or hearing like about all the fines and stuff. We'll keep track of that here, and then we'll come back to that later on, because that stuff you rarely hear about it that later. You hear about this attack, you hear about that's it, but you don't ever hear about the outcome of lawsuits and regulatory measures and all that kind of stuff. It just loses its luster and people don't pay attention to it. But I think this one's going to be very important to pay attention to because
Yeah.
of all the little um, strings attached.
Well, we're going to see how it shakes out because I got a feeling this ain't going away anytime soon because this is, again, a lot of federal regulations involved in this and European regulations. So it's going to be interesting to see how this fall out.
Yeah, and the thing to mention too is it ain't like your university. You can just like stop using this and pop on another platform. So,
Nah, you
yeah,
ain't going anywhere. Yeah.
yeah,
I
exactly.
will say that we've been talking about, because again, another third party compromise, right? Because the universities are using this tool. So this again falls in that third party, sort of a third party tool. And I will say that, Chris, I had him for IR game. I went and talked to Eric Tilds. You and I both know him real
Yeah,
well. And I got him to, we actually added a segment because of what's been going on. We added a segment into our MSA, my MSA, that basically limits some of our exposure because of the use of third party tools, just because, man, if you report on this week after week after week about
yeah.
these programs getting hacked, it's like how are you going to do business if you don't draw the line about what you're responsible for?
Yeah.
You know,
And I've
it's
been
not
in a
going to be
lot
good
of,
business.
it's interesting you bring that up because, especially being in the service provider
Yeah,
business, I've been in back and forth with, people on and attorneys about that. And then, they
yeah,
want you to be like responsible for all that stuff. And I'm like, no, I
yeah.
mean, we don't have, what power
How
do I
can you be
have?
responsible for?
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, I can't affect change over there. I mean, I can either use the product or not use the product, and then, like, come on, give me a break. So there's like this. There's always these battles between, that hey, that's the way the contract should be versus, well, let's talk about reality. That's
yeah,
not reality. Yeah,
yeah. So we're gonna along those lines, we're gonna do a first again for Signal and Noise. We're gonna do an interview with Eric Tilt so that we can talk about that because
yeah,
it's
for
going to be
sure.
a much more that subject matter is going to be coming up more and more about, okay, look, these third party things are getting out of hand. How are we going to mitigate the risk as an MSP or anybody who uses a third party piece of software or product to do their job, do the business? So we're going to do that. That's going to be the first time we do a live interview, but I'm looking forward to that because this is another one of those things we should be talking about and kind of getting out there in front of people that's important. So anyway,
Yeah, for sure.
that's a little foreshadowing. So thanks
All
everybody
right.
for showing
Yep,
up and welcome to Signal to Noise. This is
that's
our
right.
this is it, the beginning of a lot more, we hope. So, and we'll see you guys later.